and gentlemen, welcome again to an episode of Cross-Examination. I'm sitting here today again, as usual, with Father Schaak.
Good morning. Nice to see you, William.
We
had a little bit of a discussion before we started, but
we did, and the very simple reason for that is that we're talking about marriage today. Seemingly pretty innocent and simple topic, concept in any case, but very complex, especially if you're going to start looking at the history, etc. So we'll do our best to maybe answer some of your questions that you might have already, some things that you might want to hear. But yeah, so a little bit of a disclaimer that we might not get everything right. Some of it is open to interpretation, obviously, especially if you look at the scriptures. But we'll try and do our best to cover as much ground as we can. Maybe start with the historical evolution of marriage, and how did the Catholic Church understanding of marriage evolve from a civil contract, which what it was in the very first centuries, with a blessing, I believe, to a sacrament over time. Very open answer, very open question. So go ahead.
It's a big field to cover. I mean, it took many centuries up to the 16th century in the Council of Trent that it actually became a sacrament and registered in canon law as such as well. Because there was a whole process of gaining insight in the sanctity of a relationship, in also the indissolubility of marriage, and people came to understand that it was more than a civil contract. It was seen as a holy state of life, a sacrament. It renders present what it signifies. The word becomes flesh. So if you go on Christmas Day, we read from the epilogue of the Gospel of St. John, and it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh. So the incarnation of the Word is Christ himself. And that logos, that idea of the Word was very present in the Old Testament, but it became a reality, a human being, Christ, in the New Testament. And when you draw that parallel for the union of husband and wife in the sacrament of marriage, it is their word on which we base the lifestyle. I will create a life with you. It is not just a word, but that word has to become flesh. That word has to be translated into a relationship. It has to be consummated as well.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, it's
to create life, literally.
Exactly. The word is not become flesh, and it's not even a valid Catholic marriage. So the idea of we make our word come through and God visible in what we say and do is the beauty of the sacrament. It renders present what it signifies, and you see that in the Eucharist, you see that in the other sacraments, but especially in marriage. I think it is one of the most visible and tangible ways of the word becoming flesh. If you say, I'm willing to walk side by side in good times and in bad, I'm willing to discover with you what faithfulness means, and I give you my word that we will make this happen, then of course, something from God's covenant becomes visible. When God in the Old Testament said that nothing can separate you from my love, and yet we started to worship a golden calf and Baal and God knows what. But then God declares his fidelity to his people. The more if you distantiate yourself from me, I will remain faithful to you. And that became, for St. Paul, the idea of, nothing can separate us from the love of God. And in a marriage relationship, it is the same. Yeah. So, no matter what happens, love is patient, love is forgiving, love is not self-seeking, love is not boastful, but love endures all things. Love, accepts all things, because in that love relationship, something of God becomes visible, and that forgiveness, that willingness to create, that sanctity of life is there. So that is, in fact, the object of marriage. You show the relationship that God has with humanity. He gave us His word that He would remain faithful to us and life-giving and creative.
You create your own little church in your own house.
Absolutely, yes. In that sense, it becomes a unique relationship that there is no other sacrament that makes it so visible. And therefore, the the ministers of the sacrament who give that to each other is the couple. And you see that in the liturgy, always in the entrance procession or in the exit procession. The one who represents Christ walks in last, the priest or the bishop or whatever. But for a marriage entrance, it is actually the couple who walks in last, because they represent Christ. So the priest actually renders his position to the couple.
So they are the ministers of the sacrament.
As the main celebrants of this sacrament. Yes.
Interesting. Yes. I'm going to go further back even because we were talking about this before. I think it's well established and that monogamy. I wouldn't use the word marriage, but the concept of one man, one woman, facing hardship, nurturing children. Again, we're talking about thousands of years ago, very different time. That transition from that to it becoming a covenant, a sacred thing, a holy thing.
Yeah, I think if where there is love, you invest in your greatest treasure. So if that love is authentic and from the heart and a gift of free will, and also it's a gift of grace. It is through love that you become the best version of yourself, and you bring out the best in someone else. So people, when you are in love, you do everything to preserve it, to nurture it, to protect it. And I think one of our greatest fears is to lose it. And therefore, there is, when people are in a love relationship, there is this will that it is exclusive, that this is something unique that we, as two people, are able to create, to maintain, to invest in, to preserve. So yes, the exclusivity of a relationship became a greater and greater value. You don't sell yourself too cheap by sharing that with too many people, because then there is an inflation of that experience. You cannot be everything to everybody, but you can be the best version of yourself to someone who invests in you as much as you invest in the other person. So it's the monogamy. You can impose it from above, and of course, through the sacrament of marriage, that is the tradition, and that is the expectation, and all that. But it has to come from within. If it doesn't come from within, people won't live it because it's an obligation, or a culture, or a tradition.
Do you believe that love, authentic love for one another? I fell in love with my wife. I hope she fell in love with me too. Do you think that has always been the fulcrum, the trigger, the genesis, pardon the pun, of any relationship? Because, we talk about, there's marriage of conveniences, there's arranged marriages, etc. So did the love aspect come maybe more in the later centuries because, life got a little bit easier, maybe not as more complex, but certainly easier?
No, I think you were absolutely right. A lot of people, the whole concept of love, they weren't even asked whether you love each other. And it's very interesting for us in the Catholic Church. That is exactly the difference between a civil marriage and a religious marriage. In the town hall, they will not ask you whether you love each other. You can hate each other, but if you agree on that contract, sign here. it would be completely immaterial to the civil servant to know whether you love each other. They also don't ask you, are you willing to stand side by side to be faithful to each other in good times and in bad? The law doesn't care less. And thirdly, they don't even ask you, do you promise to be good parents to your children? I wish they did. It would make a lot of difference in Gaza and in all these conflict areas where people don't respect children anymore. They just become an object of abuse and violence and God knows what in societies. So for religion, that is an aspect. So the aspect of love, the church does ask, do you promise to love each other? Do you promise to be good parents? Do you promise to be faithful to each other? So that is the extra mile that religion asks you to walk, which civil law does not require.
Which is not to say that, people who are going through civil partnerships aren't in love with each other.
Of
right?
course not.
Okay. Let's be clear on that.
But the law doesn't ask.
Yeah.
So, and it is the duty of religion, re-ligare, to reconnect people with each other. And a religious wedding makes God visible in that connection. So yes, it is a prerequisite of the church to love each other. But of course, in history, I know it from, many couples. It was an arranged marriage, and the whole aspect of love was seen as a luxury. Also in sexuality, they didn't make love; they performed the duty. And that duty meant having as many children as possible because, that was expected from you. I mean, my own grandmother had 11. She was 11 times pregnant. Did she love it? I'm sure she didn't. She had such a small house, she didn't even have a bedroom. So there was fear of sex because, oh my God, how am I going to feed another child? So there was no enjoyment of sexuality, or there was no... These couples, there was an underlying fidelity, an underlying sense of responsibility and duty and obligation. But love is something very recent and something, even though St. Paul talks about it, but we have to rediscover that completely.
Yeah.
What that is.
You brought up sexuality and sex. I guess this will be a good little segue to talk about the shame that is associated with sex in culture, I think, generally speaking, right? And I'll use a quick example. I have 2 dogs. I love walking them. One of them is quite trigger happy, let's put it that way. When he sees another nice dog, he's neutered, nothing can happen. But there is a genuine visceral reaction from a lot of people of discomfort. And I really mean visceral. They have to pull the dog away. It's unholy, right? Pardon the pun. How do you see the church's role over the centuries of demonizing, I guess, to a certain extent, sex? I guess it was to make sure that it was exclusive for marriage, that it was put in place, that it was exercised through that way, to create life. Is there more to it? Was it more sinister than that? What's your take on the role of the church in that?
Yeah, I think sexuality was always seen as something, or always, but at least in the last few centuries, it has a lot to do with the Victorian age, the puritanical view towards sex. It wasn't there to be enjoyed, whilst in earlier days, in the Roman times, of course, very much so. But we moved away from that. It was more like an obligation. It was a consummation of your marital obligation.
But what was the thought behind making it so?
I think when you have control over sexuality, you influence a great part of people's conscience. And of course, having access to people's conscience when it comes to that gives you a certain amount of power as well. And I'm absolutely sure that in the Middle Ages, that was used to further the influence of the church.
Keep people in line.
Absolutely. And in confessions, still up to today, the majority of confessions are about people struggling with sexuality.
Adultery, or is it more nuanced than this?
Pornography, masturbation, all these things, sex infidelity, or even within the relationship, but not shared sex, because one watches the screen and then has his own phone whilst his wife lays in bed and with headache, But so that is what still plays on people's conscience much more than somebody confessing and saying, I have treated my employees very badly because I haven't given them a Christmas bonus for 10 years. They hardly ever come with that. It's a long process of education and catechesis to say sexuality is part of life, but your whole life is not just judged or determined by sexuality. So now here in the parish and also in the marriage preparation is the difference between having sex and making love. So yes, sex fulfills a moment, a need, but it can enslave you. It can become addictive because it never fulfills your needs in the long term.
Yeah.
But making love is actually investing in a person, and through that in yourself as well, and in a relationship. So it fulfills many needs because it literally is the giving of yourself and not just the satisfying a particular need.
I like that.
And through that, you become much more vulnerable. And there are very few people who we can be vulnerable with and come home to. So once we understand the beauty of making love, then you also understand the sanctity of life and how you want to preserve that within your relationship as something extremely dear to you. So in marriage preparation, of course, at that time, all these couples are in love. But this year, we had about more than 40 couples doing marriage preparation here. We also know that, nowadays, about 50% of the couples, they end up in divorce. So the awareness and the willingness to invest in that relationship and to open up the definition of making love, not just to the sexual act, but you make love in doing the dishes together, in creating quality time together, in walking the dog together, and God knows what you do together. And also in trusting each other enough to give each other space with your own friends, with your own hobbies, your own free time. But making love is a much wider concept than the sexual aspect.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it's a lot about acceptance as well, right? In terms of we're all flawed. I think it was actually a priest who had this famous quote saying, "A perfect marriage is," I believe it was something along the lines of, "It's an imperfect man and an imperfect woman, kind of embracing each other's, weaknesses or strengths." Right. So a lot of it is about acceptance. If you're capable of, accepting somebody's flaws and little nigging annoyances, then it's only fair you can expect the return. So it helps you, or in my relationship anyway, it helps you become more vulnerable, and look in the mirror more quickly.
What is remarkable now, I find, when I asked the couples, and a lot of couples, the vast majority are mixed marriages. So a Catholic and a non-Catholic. It can be a non-baptized person or a person from another faith.
Mm-hmm.
For the Catholic Church, there is no problem. We can marry anybody, but with some faiths, it's very difficult. For a Muslim to marry a Catholic is not that evident, not that easy. Anyway, for us, a dispensation is needed, and that if it's your first marriage for both of you, that's a very easy process. But when I ask, why do you choose totally against the current of the tide, because the vast majority of us do not marry in church anymore, but why do you choose to get married in church? A lot of them say, we feel blessed and we want to have that blessing. So the awareness of, gratitude, of awe that this relationship has developed, of wanting to show to friends and guests on your wedding day that this blessing is in need of support, of witnesses of God, of a best man, a bridal party, who are literally asked also to play their role in this relationship, because love is too big for two people to contain in one relationship. And you need friends, you need counselors, you need family, you need people to celebrate with you and be near you in good times and in bad. So that feeling of blessing, we feel blessed and we would like to share that with others on our wedding day. It's not just a big party and booze up and a dance, but it's something sacred to us. It's quite novel and courageous, and I think in this day and age, really a protest against all the lack of unity and also all the division and the polarization that exists in society. Here are two people, in spite of everything, who say in this very uncertain and conflictive age, yeah, we have confidence in the future because we will walk it together, but we need your help. We are here to create community. We are here to make life a little bit better, regardless of residency permits and all that. We have a lot of people from different cultures here, from different faiths. But that is how God intended the world to be. If somebody from Cameroon marries a Japanese, they are completely different cultures. But if they are somehow able to overcome all these barriers, which make us initially think, oh, this will never work. But actually, quite often, they have a bigger incentive to make it work against all odds, and are more willing to invest in it. And it's very moving to see these multicultural, interreligious, and complicated relationships in this international community. And somehow they show how the world was intended to be.
Yeah. A little, we're maybe going ahead a bit too far. But you mentioned cultural differences. I'm Belgian. My wife's Irish. We have, she comes from a large family. I come from a small family. We're very similar cultures. Don't get me wrong. Belgium and Ireland are not Cameroon and Japan. But you do see those little differences kind of popping up here and there. I think quite often, again, you know this better than I do with confessions, but I think a lot of the fights are around the children, if not money. Those, I think, are the two big ones. And so there is, in our, there's a difference. And I've got a very, I wouldn't say strict upbringing, but more French, children know their places, etc. Whereas, my wife, bigger family, so there was more latitude, put it that way. The kids had more liberty to do everything. And then we live in a country where basically sometimes people cynically say, well, the kids can say anything and everything they want, and they've got the rule of the house. But it does nurture conversation. It does forge as well, because we obviously, you have to find common ground, otherwise, so it does forge. Those cultural differences, I guess, is my point, do create an impetus and a spark to forge something that is unique to you as a couple and as married. Just as a side note. You mentioned together. Before we, a little bit back into history again, Jesus and this is a tough word, indissolubility. Goodness me. Yeah. Could you briefly, explain what Jesus' teachings on marriage were, especially on that concept of the word I can't pronounce?
Yes, there is what God has put together, man shall not divide. So, and the sacrament of marriage has a permanent character. So, the marriage will remain valid. You did it out of your own free will. There was mutual consent. In your vows, you rendered God present. This is a sacred act, but through your word, it has become flesh and it has been consumed. So we cannot undo that. It was a public act. And therefore, and the children derive rights from that as well, of course. I mean, they are born under these, in this valid condition. So we cannot invalidate what we have declared sacred in God's name. That stands. We can declare it null and void of meaning. Meaning, if it no longer is a relationship in which God becomes visible, in which Christ is present because of many different circumstances, there are many reasons for an annulment, then it is quite a pastoral, therapeutical process to go to the annulment. First of all, to do justice to the pain that the couple has undergone. That can have many different reasons. If one person becomes addicted to substances, or has many acts of infidelity, or starts to abuse the children. And anyway, there are many different reasons. Then, of course, the harm that this relationship does to a greater number, the children and people around, you have to always look at the lesser evil out of two impossible situations. So we have to harm as few people as possible. If this relationship cannot be sustained, you have to undo it. And then the ecclesiastical tribunal can declare the marriage null and void of meaning, and therefore do justice to the pain that this couple has.
But it goes through a process of potential remedy first before.
Yes, of course. We look at reconciliation. We look at, if you marry in church, the church also becomes a partner in your relationship. So you can turn to the church for pastoral counseling, for help, for forgiveness, for marriage counseling. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You also have to be realistic. So then through the annulment procedure, and that can take up to several years, and witnesses are called and all that. If the marriage is annulled, you are free to marry again. So that is possible. But the first marriage cannot be erased. It is part of your fiber, of your history, of your, you have become who you are through, what happened in your life. And if it was contracted under valid circumstances, then it remains a valid event. So it remains a valid marriage.
Which brings me, obviously, we're always going to talk about those divorce rates that are, very high. I would think, you mentioned 50%. I think it's kind of globally a bit of an average. Interestingly, there's, as far as I could see, there's 2 countries where divorce is illegal. The Vatican and the Philippines. I didn't know that. But as a side note, look, I'm a huge believer in marriage and the importance it has also for children growing up. You mentioned the children in the beginning. I think that you mentioned the point where, it causes more harm than good, right? I think the annulment process seems to be going far further in establishing that or getting to a good picture of that, versus a divorce is, more civil divorce is very quick, very, no questions asked, done. So I like the idea that you have to really go through a rigorous process in the Christian annulment versus divorce, because again, academia is unequivocal about the damage that a divorce can do to children, especially young children. The statistics are startling. They really are. I don't have them handy, but it can be catastrophic for children. So I guess what I'm asking is it too easy today to divorce? Or is it too hard to get an annulment in church?
Yeah, I think there's truth in both.
And how do you find the right, what's the right middle solution here?
Yeah, well, every couple is unique. So also for me, it's difficult to make a general statement.
Fair.
But yes, divorce nowadays is quite an easy option. And very often an option that starts from me rather than us. So it's quite a self-centered option. If a couple makes that decision, informs the children, and things will be okay from the couple's point of view. And I must say that an awful lot of divorced couples do take very good care of their children. I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean
the
to.
circumstances, they do their best.
Yeah.
So a failed marriage does not mean failed parents. That's
Absolutely. Well, thanks for clarifying that.
But yes, it is true that it is a lot easier to divorce now, and also the role models that we have in society, especially in our modern world, make divorce something like, well, yeah, normal. And as you say, if you go into marriage with all these expectations and hoping to fulfill your dream with this particular person, it is a huge sadness when that dream collapses and when that relationship is no longer life-giving. I mean, but somehow I think quite a few couples they look at the short-term happiness, but do not calculate the consequences for a longer-term fidelity that comes with, of course, sacrifice as well, and accepting consequences of certain choices, and sometimes saying no to something that you really want. Is it sustainable for both to have full-time jobs if you have children as well? But very often the decision starts with me and not with us. So what is best for us as a family? And then, of course, also for the children, there is very little education in accepting the consequences of certain behavior. One week you are with mom, the other week you are with dad. So if you have an issue with mom, well, next week that no longer applies because then you are with dad. And of course, even though the parents try to maintain a certain agreed upon unity,
decorum.
But of course, new partners get into the equation. So all of a sudden, children have 8 uncles or 8 grandparents. Who all have a say, and who in the end has authority over these children to say, here you cross the line.
Yeah,
there is an awful lot of escaping the agreed upon norms. And I don't want to judge that because I also know how difficult it is for parents nowadays to keep all the plates in the air. But for the children, it is very difficult to feel a sense of belonging when the family is uprooted. That American program, Modern Family, it is, I think, is very funny and quite
hilarious.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things come to the fore. I mean, our families now are anything but traditional. We are in a transitional sort of phase. And we have to be very careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, to still invest in values and what is sacred to us. And we do not separate from that, even though the society changes. But I think that is one of our difficulty in our modern age, where do we touch upon this is important to us, to this we will hold on, to this we will declare our fidelity. Even though within our relationships and within our society, and even though within the church, we find that difficult to find, to maintain, to discover.
Yeah, I think the main message here is that there is no right answer or wrong answer.
Exactly. It is in the walking the path that it discovers itself. And we have to also be glad that so much actually does go right in spite of so many. Yeah,
absolutely.
And is a divorce therefore too easy? I cannot measure the pain of people who go through that decision. So I don't think it's easy. It's always a disappointment.
No, I don't mean the act. I mean more the process.
What you mean, because it looks like that, and especially when it's a third or even a fourth. I buried a judge not so long ago who was married for 5 times. His youngest child was 2, and his eldest child was 50. yes, and the youngest who was then the lady who had to deal with his funeral. She was in her early 40s, whilst the judge was in his 80s. You kind of feel, an excellent judge under great pressure, doing the right thing in the world, but somehow that in his private life, but what, yeah, how did this come to be? That so many people were part of that decision and created that family. And of course, then you also see that, yeah, half brothers and four former wives who all feel that they are also the mother of his child, have a say in the funeral, becomes extremely complicated.
And we haven't even touched on succession rights and all that stuff. That must
Also
be
for the pastor to find some meaning and keeping people as intact as possible under the circumstances, with tremendous empathy and pastoral outreach. But yes, the church has certain rules and regulations and traditions, but it's very difficult to rub these in people's faces. You have to go back to, what values have stood the test of time and what is worth investing in because we have adopted it and we are convinced that this is sacred to us.
You mentioned Modern Family, and I will take that quite literally, and maybe as a priest, put your feet to the fire a little bit here and talking about same-sex marriage. You mentioned Modern Family, Cam, and I forgot his other name, the brother. I guess I'm not sure how you want to answer this, but what is your personal maybe take as not Father Shark, but as Shark on same-sex marriage? And is there a difference with Father Shark's take, i.e. the church's take on same-sex marriage?
Well,
in the church, obviously.
Yes, I am a member of the church and I'm also a priest, but I'm also a pastor and understanding, ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est. And it's a same-sex relationship would ask the same as a heterosexual relationship. Fidelity, sanctity of life, commitment to each other. So if that relationship is a relationship in which God's love becomes tangible, visible, I see it as something sacred as well, and something that I would not deprive people of having. I think, first of all, we don't create ourselves. Some people are born with blue eyes and other people with blonde hair or no hair at all, and other people are born gay. I mean, we don't turn each other gay or make each other gay or whatever. It is what it is in nature. And I don't think God made a mistake when he created or he made gay people.
So it's sorry to interject here, but why then would some scriptures indicate that he might have made a mistake? Do you know what I mean? Because, the Bible is not an easy read for a gay person.
Absolutely. And yes, there are very strong opinions about when one man lays with another. Of course, it goes against God's plan, God's intention. But the fact is, it exists. And we cannot deny that this is part of nature and of society as well. So yes, over 2,000 years in the New Testament, the Old Testament earlier, people had very strong opinions about same-sex relationship and used religion to say this is completely wrong, sinful, it cannot be. But it is. So then the church says, yes, you can be in a gay relationship, but you cannot consume it. Which, of course,
because there is no life coming out of that consummation, or is it more cynical, sinister than that, or
simply because officially there should be no sex outside of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, yeah.
heterosexual marriage, so that counts for everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, but also, of course, sexuality should be open to procreation. And with same gender sex, that is not possible. So yes, there is that aspect. But in later editions of canon law in the 80s, they also say that sex is not only for procreation, but also to strengthen the bond between the conjugates.
Mm-hmm.
So there is also.
But here, conjugates being man and woman, according to the church.
Yes, man and woman. So in the church, same-sex marriage is not a sacrament. But now we
should it be? Sorry, I'm putting a feet on fire.
That opinion is immaterial whether I think it should be or not. What I think is a big step forward is that there is a great acceptance of gay couples in the church. Pope Leo last week received a big delegation from the LGBTQ community in Rome. It was one of the first, you could call it Catholic pride marches. And
how far we've come,
which is a step forward. The Belgian Bishops' Conference forwarded a blessing for same-sex couples a few years ago, which the Vatican did not revoke. So under Pope Francis, they sent it, and the Belgian bishop says, we bless the union of gay couples with these prayers.
Like we did in the very earliest centuries of our Christian church, before it became a sacrament. Right? That was also just a blessing, I believe, right?
Yeah, for heterosexual couples.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, the fact that the Vatican didn't stop us, didn't stop the Belgian Bishops' Conference, is a good sign. And then the Dutch Bishops' Conference, they immediately said, no, this cannot happen. So we can bless each individual, but not the couple. Well, that is a rather mean explanation of what the Belgian bishop suggested. So the Vatican is still with that explanation. So in fact, we had a gay couple here. One of the ambassadors declared his love for his husband. And we used that blessing from the Belgian Bishops' Conference here in our parish. And quite a few members of the diplomatic corps and also of the family were there. And did it feel like something sacred? Did it feel that it rendered present what it signified? So in that sense, did it feel sacramental? Did it make God present? Yes, in the authenticity of that couple.
And the love between those two individuals.
The love, the sacrifice. They went through a lot and they came to this decision. And I know them very well. They are still together. I think it was a beautiful moment in which we recognize, God's children are made in many, many different ways. And these relationships also have a right to exist and a right to a blessing. Of course, it's never enough. Why is this not a sacrament and why that? Okay, because we are not there yet. And in several continents, the whole issue of homosexuality is, of course, totally not open for discussion. In Uganda, there is a death penalty. So the church as a universal body cannot adopt something that will endanger the life of her faithful in several countries. But it can move very slowly into the direction of saying, heterosexuals, homosexual couples, you are both loved by God. And this is one way of showing that we feel blessed having you with us, and we bless you equally back. Bene dixio, that's all it means. Bene meaning good, dixio speaking. We speak well of you.
Yeah, that's very meaningful. We're quite deep into it. I think I was quite right in saying this could be a two-parter. So we'll target for here for now. I think next one we'll talk a little bit more about marriage preparation to prepare basically people for or young couples for what's to come and the difficulties. So we can talk about that in the next podcast where we talk about the current actual difficulties that marriages face in 2025, and then what your role is as a pastor there. You mentioned pastoral care and counsel. I think we can elaborate a little bit more about that. For what it's worth, I'm all up for gay marriage. What I mean with that is that, and this is, we might cut this out, but as a observation and very easily becomes a joke, is that the divorce rates are quite interesting. So if you look at divorce rates, gay, heterosexual, and lesbian, the gay marriages have actually the lowest divorce rates, then the heterosexuals, then the lesbian couples. I'll let you interpret why that is. There's a joke to be made. Again, it's all jokes, people.
It's a cliffhanger. Well, it's but serious stuff in the joke. When you say that divorce is not allowed in two countries, in the Philippines and in the Vatican,
I believe it was.
It's
my fact checking on that.
The Vatican, of course, is the country with the smallest number of Catholics in the world. Huh? So very few people have a Vatican passport. The Philippines may be one of the most numerous Catholics. So the truth lies there somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. And I think this is my takeaway from our conversation right now, is that there is no black white. It's very situational. And a lot of it is it's a far more difficult topic than I anticipated it to be.
The great purpose of theology, of scripture, of the teachings of the church in the whole issue of relationships comes back to one and the same point, and that is life is sacred. And therefore, in what form or shape we encounter life, we always need to rediscover that aspect. And that is tailor-made in every relationship. And what works for one, that may not work for the other. But if we can agree that where there is love and charity, there is God.